Before this story begins, imagine winning a fortune only to discover your prize is a terrified Apache woman sold as a slave. One rancher thought he had struck gold, but what he uncovered was a secret powerful enough to start a war, change a life, and ignite a bond that no chains could break. This story is filled with danger, betrayal, courage, and a fight for freedom that will leave you breathless. So before we ride into the heart of the Old West, make sure to subscribe, share, and comment. Now saddle up, let's start this video. Elias Boone felt the cold kiss of a Colt barrel against his temple long before he realized he had stepped into the wrong saloon. The room was packed, alive with drunken shouts and slamming whiskey glasses, but everything fell silent when the gambler in the velvet coat told him to sit. Elias wasn't in town for trouble. He had come to buy supplies, fix a mule's busted saddle strap, and head back before nightfall. Yet here he was, dragged into a circle of men oozing danger, all of them hungry for something he didn't understand but could feel deep in his bones. He sat because refusing wasn't an option. The gambler's smile stretched like taffy as he spread a deck of cards across the table, each one shimmering beneath the lantern light. Elias didn't gamble, he didn't drink, he didn't flirt with trouble, but he could see it. He had been targeted the moment he walked in. A quiet man with steady hands made for a perfect mark. The gambler slid a single card toward him, tapping the back once like it held the weight of destiny. Win and you walk away rich. Lose and, well, let's not talk about losing. Elias wanted to stand, walk out, forget this town even existed, but the men behind him formed a wall of sweat, gunmetal, and whiskey fumes. There was no path but forward. The gambler dealt the final cards like he was slicing through fate itself. Elias lifted the corner of his card with 2 fingers, heartbeat steady though every instinct begged him to run. His card stared back with unforgiving clarity. A king. The gambler's grin faltered, then cracked. Then died entirely as Elias laid his card on the table. The saloon erupted, chairs crashing, coins slamming onto wood, men shouting curses or praise depending on what they lost in that moment. Elias remained still, more confused than triumphant. He had won, but he didn't even know the stakes. The gambler slammed a fist into the table, then barked an order. Bring it out. 2 men dragged a heavy crate from the shadows, setting it before Elias with a dull thud that rattled the floorboards. The gambler leaned close, whiskey breath thick enough to choke on. Congratulations, Cowboy, you just won your fortune. The crate didn't look like fortune. It looked like trouble wrapped in old wood and iron. Elias hesitated, but the crowd pushed closer, urging him to claim the prize. The gambler winked, tapping the crate once. Don't open it here, take it, leave right now. That was the first sign something was wrong. The second was the faint, almost invisible shift of weight inside the crate, too soft to be cargo, too uneven to be coins. Elias didn't argue. He took the crate, tied it to his horse, and rode out of town without looking back. The desert wind dragged dusk across the sky like a torn blanket, each mile home growing heavier on Elias' shoulders. What had he won? Why had the gambler been so eager to push him out? And what was inside that crate that moved, breathed, lived? By the time he reached his ranch, night had swallowed the horizon, leaving only the soft glow of his lantern cutting through the dark. He hauled the crate into the barn, hands trembling despite his steady nature. Something inside shifted again, soft, deliberate, human. He pried the lid open with a crowbar, bracing himself for anything except what he actually found. A woman. Not just any woman, an Apache woman, young but worn from fear and captivity, her wrists bound, her ankles scraped raw from rope burn. She pressed herself into the farthest corner of the crate when the lid opened, breathing hard, eyes sharp with defiance even in terror. Elias froze, the lantern trembling in his grip. This wasn't cargo. This was a person, a prisoner. A victim of whatever twisted game he had been dragged into. He cut her bindings gently, careful not to startle her, though her eyes tracked every movement like he was a predator. She didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't trust him even as the ropes fell away. Elias stepped back, palms raised. I didn't know, I never would have, he stopped. Words meant nothing right now. She needed safety, food, warmth. The storm outside rumbled its warning across the sky, wind clawing at the barn door. She couldn't be turned out into that. She could barely stand. Elias stepped farther back, voice low and steady. You're free to go when the storm passes. No one here will harm you. You have my word. He meant it, every syllable. But the woman's distrust was carved deep. She rose shakily, legs trembling, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. She scanned the barn for exits, weapons, shadows. She was trained to survive. She expected betrayal. She had every reason to. She tried to walk, collapsing once before catching herself against a hay bale. Elias didn't move to help. He knew better than to approach someone cornered by fear. Instead, he placed a blanket on a clean stall and set water nearby. She watched him like a hawk studies a snake. After minutes tense enough to snap a man's nerves, she slowly moved to the blanket, lowering herself with a wince. Still silent, still guarded. Elias sat at a distance, back against a post, watching the storm claw its way across the land outside. He had stumbled into something far bigger than a crooked card game. Someone had captured her, transporting her, sold her like livestock. Someone dangerous, someone cruel, and someone who would not be happy knowing she had slipped into the hands of a man like him, a man who would rather die than return her to chains. The storm roared, but it was nothing compared to the storm that had just entered his life. And she wasn't done changing it yet. Morning came slow and pale, creeping through the cracks of the barn like it feared waking what slept inside. Elias opened his eyes to find the Apache woman sitting upright, blanket around her shoulders, watching him with the same fierce intensity as last night, but something in her gaze had softened. Not trust, not comfort, but awareness. He wasn't a captor. He wasn't her enemy. He was something in between, and she was trying to understand him. Elias rose slowly, offering a soft nod. She didn't return it, but she didn't recoil either. That was progress. He placed bread and water near her, stepping back without a word. She waited, observing him like she expected a trap, then finally reached for the food. When she ate, her hands trembled, not from fear but from exhaustion and hunger. Elias felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at whoever had put her in that crate. When she finished, she spoke for the first time, voice low and rough from disuse. "Why did you buy me?" Elias shook his head instantly. "I didn't buy you. They forced me into a game. I didn't know." She studied him long, weighing the truth in his words. After a moment she nodded once, barely visible but unmistakable. "My name is Taya," she said, pronouncing it with strength despite her weakness. Elias introduced himself quietly, keeping his tone gentle. Taya stood, gripping the post for balance. "I must go back to my people," she said. "They will think I am dead." Elias agreed without hesitation, but he knew the danger lurking like a rattlesnake in dry grass. The men who caged her wouldn't simply forget her. If they returned to town and learned the crate had disappeared, they would come searching, and they would bring guns. Taya tried to walk out into the morning, but her legs faltered. Elias caught her by instinct, then froze, realizing too late how close he was. She tensed but didn't strike him. Instead, she steadied herself with clenched teeth. "I am strong," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "You are," Elias agreed softly, "but even warriors need time to heal." Taya didn't answer. She hated her weakness. It made her feel vulnerable. It made her feel trapped all over again. Elias stepped back, giving her space she desperately needed. By midday she could walk without collapsing, though her movements were slow and painful. Elias began saddling a horse, planning the route to her homeland, but as he tightened the straps, he felt the earth tremble faintly under his boots. Hoofbeats, dozens. Taya stepped out of the barn, eyes narrowing. "They are here." Elias grabbed his rifle, heart pounding. Dust rose along the ridge as armed riders approached, men from the gambling caravan. Their leader, the velvet-coated gambler, rode ahead with a pistol resting casually on his thigh. He halted at the fence, surveying the ranch with vulture-like coldness. "Morning, Boone. Looks like you walked away with something that wasn't yours." Elias stepped forward, rifle raised. "She's a human being, not a prize." The gambler gave a slow, mocking smile. "Oh, she's worth more than you can imagine. Now hand her over and maybe we won't burn your little ranch to the ground." Behind him, the riders cocked their rifles. Taya stood beside Elias, jaw clenched. "They will not take me again," she whispered. Elias made a choice in that instant. A simple one, a dangerous one. "You're not taking her." The gambler chuckled, shaking his head like Elias was a foolish child. "Have it your way. Kill the cowboy and bring the girl alive." Gunfire erupted. Elias shoved Taya behind the trough as bullets tore into the barn wall. He returned fire, dropping one rider, then another. Taya grabbed a fallen pistol, firing with surprising accuracy despite her injuries. The gamblers had expected fear. Instead, they met fury. They met resistance. They met two people who would rather die than surrender. The fight raged across the ranch. Elias ducked behind a wagon, firing until the barrels smoked. Taya moved like lightning, her warrior training shining through as she outmaneuvered men who underestimated her. But the gambler wasn't done. He rode toward the barn, firing wildly. Elias sprinted after him, tackling him off his horse. The two crashed into the dirt, fists flying. The gambler was larger but slower. Elias fought with a lifetime of anger burning in his chest. With one final blow, the gambler collapsed, unconscious. Silence settled over the ranch, broken only by the groans of wounded men fleeing into the desert. Taya exhaled shakily, lowering her pistol. Elias approached her carefully. "You all right?" She nodded. "Because of you." Elias shook his head. "Because of us." They stood together, breathless, bruised, alive. Something unspoken sparked between them, not romance, not yet, but something powerful. Respect, gratitude, connection forged in fire. By late afternoon, they saddled 2 horses and began the journey to her homeland. The land changed slowly as they rode, dry plains giving way to red cliffs and quiet canyons. Taya spoke more freely now, telling him how she had been taken during a raid near the winter camp. Elias listened, his anger simmering at every detail. When they finally reached the edge of her people's valley, several Apache scouts emerged, bows drawn, but the moment they saw Taya, their expressions shifted from suspicion to relief. They led her home with honor, guiding Elias with guarded curiosity. When the tribe elder approached, Taya spoke firmly. "This man saved me, he protected me." The elder studied Elias long, then nodded once in solemn gratitude. "You have returned what was stolen. Our spirits remember such deeds." Elias bowed his head respectfully. Taya stepped closer, offering him a small carved stone, a token of her people, a piece of her heart. She looked into his eyes with a softness he had not seen before. "You changed my fate," she whispered, "and I will not forget you." Elias swallowed hard, tipping his hat. "Safe travels, Taya," she smiled gently. "Safe journeys, Elias Boone." As he rode away, he felt the weight of the world shift around him, not heavier but different, brighter. He had come to town for supplies. Instead, he had changed a life, and in doing so, his own heart had changed too. The desert wind whispered behind him as he rode home, carrying her name with it. Taya, a reminder of the woman he had saved and the woman who had saved him in return.